There once was a boy named Eustace Clarence Scrubb, and he almost deserved it. This is how my favorite book, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader by C.S. Lewis, begins. Lewis was on the cover of Time magazine on September 8, 1947, and over 200 million copies of his 38 books have been sold. Even 49 years after his death, Lewis remains a well-known author, and my favorite author. Clive Staples Lewis, better known as C.S. Lewis, was born on November 29, 1898 in Belfast, Ireland. At the age of 4, he decided to call himself Jack, since he had never liked the name Clive. He was known as Jack for the rest of his life. He had one brother, Warren, who was 3 years older. His mother, Flora, died when he was only 10, and his relationship with his father, Albert Lewis, was a little interesting, as evidenced by this quote about his father. He would never have been guided by his first thoughts, which would probably have been right, nor even by his 21st, which would at least have been explicable. No, beyond doubt, he would have prolonged deliberation till his 101st, and they would be infallibly and invincibly wrong. Because of his father's strange decision-making process, Lewis attended several terrible boarding schools in England, most of which were run by literal madmen and were closed soon after he attended. While he was away at school, he became an atheist at the age of 15, though he did become a Christian again later and became famous as a Christian apologist. At the age of 16, he read a fantasy book by George MacDonald, which he later said was his first step in returning to Christianity, and which also influenced his own later fantasy writings. He was also influenced by his friend J.R.R. Tolkien and other fellow members of the Inklings. The Inklings was a group of friends at Oxford University, and so was also called the Oxford Socratic Club. They met informally in a pub called the Eagle and Child, where they debated and critiqued one another's writings. Many well-known books, including the Lord of the Rings series, were first read at their meetings. Well-known members of the Inklings besides C.S. Lewis included J.R.R. Tolkien, author of Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, Christopher Tolkien, his son, Warren Lewis, C.S. Lewis's brother, and Charles Williams, author of many King Arthur and Merlin stories. One of the most interesting things about C.S. Lewis's life was that in 1955, he wrote his autobiography, Surprised by Joy, meaning the concept of joy, not a person, and inspired by a quote from Wordsworth. Soon after, Lewis met Helen Joy David Gresham, known as Joy, an American. She moved to England soon after, and in 1956, she was threatened with deportation, so at the age of 58, Lewis married her in a civil ceremony to prevent that. In 1957, Joy was diagnosed with an incurable form of bone cancer, and so Lewis married her in a church ceremony in the hospital when they thought she was going to die. Amazingly though, she recovered and lived for 3 more years with Lewis. Lewis himself died 3 years after his wife did on November 23rd, 1963. This was the same day that President Kennedy was assassinated. Lewis's works have survived him though, becoming classics. Besides his scholarly works, Lewis wrote adult fiction and nonfiction, and children's fiction. His first major work of adult fiction was the Space Trilogy. The books are, in order, Out of the Silent Planet, Perelandra, and That Hideous Strength. They were Lewis's side of a bargain between himself and Tolkien, that Lewis would write a space travel series, and Tolkien a time travel. Tolkien's The Notion Club papers was never published, but Lewis's Space Trilogy became widely read. They contain many references to the Middle-earth of his friend Tolkien's books, and to the King Arthur and Merlin legends of his friend Williams. Lewis's next major work of adult fiction was The Screwtape Letters. This was the book that got him onto the cover of Time magazine. The book that Lewis himself considered his best was Till We Have Faces, a retelling of the Greek myth of Cupid and Psyche. Lewis's other major work of adult fiction was The Great Divorce. which was named as a critique on The Marriage of Heaven and Hell by William Blake, which Lewis called a disastrous error. In this book, Lewis also shows how much he respects George MacDonald. C.S. Lewis is famous today for his adult nonfiction, most of which were works of Christian apologetics, which means that they explain and defend the Christian faith. He has been called one of the best apologists of the 20th century. His most well-known book of apologetics is Mere Christianity, which introduced an argument now known as Lewis's trilemma. Mere Christianity, as well as his other apologetic books, Miracles and The Problem of Pain, use logic and thought experiments. Lewis's logic and argument skills, developed by debates with the Inklings, are really amazing and a lot of fun to read. He also wrote several non-apologetic Christian works, including The Four Loves. In addition, he wrote his autobiography, Surprised by Joy, which, as I said earlier, was actually written before he met his wife, Joy. Today, though, Lewis is probably best known for the books in his children's fantasy series, The Chronicles of Narnia. They are 7 books about a land called Narnia, where there are talking animals, fauns, dryads, centaurs, and all kinds of other people and creatures out of mythology, and also the lion Aslan. In each book, some children from England find themselves in Narnia and have adventures there. The books are, in chronological order, The Magician's Nephew, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, The Horse and His Boy, Prince Caspian, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, The Silver Chair, and The Last Battle, though they were not originally published in that order. They have influenced many other book series, including Harry Potter and Artemis Fowl. They do contain many themes from his adult works, including the fact that they are Christian in nature. However, they are not an allegory. On this point, Lewis said that Aslan is not an allegorical figure. He is an invention, giving an imaginary answer to the question, what might happen if there really was a world like Narnia? This is a supposition. This supposition is similar to the thought experiments of Lewis's apologetics. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe also contains a version of Lewis's trilemma. C.S. Lewis, born Irish in the 1800s and an atheist at the age of 15, eventually became one of the most well-known English authors and Christian apologists of the 1900s, writing adult fiction and nonfiction and children's fiction. And he also became my favorite author. My main sources were Surprised by Joy by C.S. Lewis and Time magazine. Are there any questions?
In your reading of C.S. Lewis materials, do you find any common theme that he uses throughout all of his books or segments of his books?
The question was whether, in reading C.S. Lewis, I found common themes. And, well, all of them are at least somewhat Christian in nature, though Till We Have Faces, since it's a retelling of a Greek myth, not so much. But at least all of them do have that central morality in them. But besides that, like his science fiction books, he calls them science fiction, but they seem more like fairy tales almost, and a lot of his, or fantasy, a lot of his books have that theme as well.
How long have you been interested in C.S. Lewis?
The question was, how long have I been interested in C.S. Lewis? And pretty much as long as, I don't remember starting reading books by C.S. Lewis, I just remember always liking Narnia, and then as I've gotten older, I've moved into the adult books, and some of them are still a little hard, but I like everything I've read. Are there any more questions? Thank you.